All right, our next speaker is our special guest who has traveled all the way from Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. This is Patrick Wood. I discovered Patrick Wood a year ago in September when I was attending a meeting dealing with property rights issues. And for those of you who don't know, we're in the midst of a real battle here in Sonoma County, standing up for our property rights. Well, Patrick Wood was there as well as a speaker, and when you realize if we lose the sovereignty of our nation, we've lost our property rights that go right along with it. So we're all in this battle together. He did a wonderful, masterful job talking about something that was very unfamiliar to most of us a year ago, and that was this battle to protect our nation against the North American Union, which is this movement which is coming up trying to make the United States, Mexico, and Canada all one big union like the European Union. And later they'll move it on to have even a wider union, bringing in Central and Southern America as well, Central and South America. So I would like to tell a little bit about Patrick Wood. He is an author. He is a very brilliant man who has done a lot of research, starting with the Trilateral Commission that he has written about. And he co-authored a book with Anthony Sutton about this. And Anthony Sutton is of the Hoover Institute. He's going to be speaking about all the research that he has done. He's also going to tell you, we've learned about the father of our country, wonderful George Washington. You're going to hear about the father of the North American Union, Robert Pastor. You'll be able to compare what kind of a character this man has to the father of our nation, George Washington, and the integrity and honesty and love for our nation that he had. And you'll also be hearing about the timeline to the North American Union, what the plans are, what life would be like without the protection of our U.S. Constitution, and what life would be like if we were part of a regional government of Canada, Mexico, and the United States. So please join me in welcoming Patrick Wood.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'd like you all to stand right where you are, if you would. Just stand up right there. Everybody in the room needs to stand just for a second. I am Patrick Wood, by the way. I'm the founder and director of World Research Library and also the editor of the August Review. And just a couple of housekeeping things here. There's two papers on the back table back here, on this first table, the blue table. There's two papers here. One is titled The Trilateral Commission Usurping Authority, and the other is called Toward a North American Union. They're free, F-R-E-E. So you don't have to worry about them, like picking your pocket over there. Those things are free, but you can look at some of the other books too. There's another book over here I want to point your attention to, and that is the book by the recent book by Jerry Corsi, The Late Great USA. This is this is the only book out right now, and it's an excellent book on the threat to the United States now to be merged into Canada and the United States. So if you don't have this book, and you go out of here and you think, I don't need a book, after you've heard what I have to say today, if you don't read this book, you'll have to browbeat them for as long as you know them, okay, until they do it. So in any case, I want to take you through a little exercise here. And I want you to, I know you're all good, loyal Americans. I'm speaking to the political right here. I'm speaking to the religious right and probably the far right. So, I know I can get away with a few more things here maybe than I could with some other audiences that we might get around this area. So I want you to put your left hand, take your left hand, that's this one, and cross your fingers. Put it behind your back. Okay? Now, put your right hand over your heart. That's right. You got your fingers crossed now? Seriously, cross your fingers or you're going to be doubly cursed by what I'm going to have you say. Okay? So here we go. This is the NAU, North American Union, Pledge of Allegiance, and there's the flag. Say hail to the, no, don't say hail to the flag, but I pledge allegiance to the flag of the North American Union and to the oligarchy for which it stands. Three nations under humanism, indivisible, with servitude and justice for all. Thank you. Be seated. Now, if that doesn't get your attention, I don't know what will. But there may be a day when we have such a pledge of allegiance in our country where we will be pledging to a new flag. I belong to a couple of groups in Coeur d'Alene that start each meeting with a pledge of allegiance. I'm having trouble with it because the other people in these groups, they don't understand what's going on. I have a problem with that because you stand up and you recite the pledge of allegiance that we know, and you know it's not reality. I won't say it's hypocritical, but you state this and you almost just want to stay silent and cry while everybody else is speaking the Pledge of Allegiance. Because we're not one nation under God anymore. We used to be. But, as I'm going to suggest to you today, our country has been hijacked. We have enemies of the state that we never banked on 25 years ago. We have people who are trying to sink us and put us under that we never saw coming 25, 30 years ago. But they're enemies of the state, and they must be treated and fought like enemies of the state that they are. I'm going to do something a little different and tell you what I'm going to speak about today. That way, when I speak about it, you'll know what target I'm trying to hit here, okay? Number one, premise number one. I'm going to suggest to you and demonstrate that the executive branch of the U.S. government was hijacked in 1976, at least by that time, by members of this group called the Trilateral Commission upon the election of President James Earl Carter and Vice President Walter Mondale. That's premise number one. Number two, I'm going to demonstrate that the Trilateral Commission domination has continued unchallenged and unabated since that time. And number three, I'm going to suggest that the Security and Prosperity Partnership, which is part and parcel of the North American Union or North American Community right now, are the exclusive policy creation of members of the Trilateral Commission. Now, some of you have heard this term, Trilateral Commission, before, and for some of you, this may, kind of bring up a cloud of, well, that's really kind of far out and weird, and what kind of conspiracy theory we're talking about here. I want to tell you that in my vocabulary, there is no C word. I don't use the word conspiracy. I hope you don't either. Because in this case, there is nothing hidden. Nothing I'm pulling out today for you is unavailable in the public arena. If I got it, you could get it. It's just a matter of time and knowing where to look. So there's no conspiracy with this. And we started studying the Trilateral Commission back in the late 1970s. And there was plenty of information available then, and there's even more information available now. So there is no conspiracy. So I don't want to let anybody perpetuate that thought that this is some far out, weird right-wing or weird left-wing type of a diatribe. These are facts that are going to be supported by evidence, as you will see. Now, why should we identify the enemy? Well, in the 5th century BC, in the book by Sun Tzu called The Art of War, some of you have heard this before, Chinese, it says, if you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. If you know yourself but not the enemy, for every victory gained, you will also suffer a defeat. If you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle. Now I ask you a question. We're sitting here today, actually we're not doing too bad because we had breakfast and whatever, and we got to take a shower this morning, we're doing okay. But we're bloodied, we're beaten up, we're being overrun. Virtually every position we have is being overrun by a tsunami of warriors who are dead set against us to crush us. Why have we, or I should say, how have we allowed ourselves to come to this point? I can tell you why. According to the Art of War, it's because we have not known the enemy and we have not known ourselves. These two things need to change if we're going to be successful in our struggle against this tyranny that's upon us. Now, let me give you a little rough history, quick history on the Trilateral Commission. It's a private organization, not government. Commission implies government, but they just use that name, I think, to confuse people. It's a private organization founded in 1973 by two men in particular. David Rockefeller was one, the international banker, and Zbigniew Brzezinski was the other, who was an academic at the time, rising star in the academic world. And at the time, 284 members were asked to join the Trilateral Commission from three areas. This is where the word tri comes from, trilateral. There was North America, that is Canada and the United States, Europe, and Japan. These three regions comprise the membership, roughly one-third, one-third, and one-third. And then there are specific marching instructions in their own literature and their own pamphlets and stuff they put out. Their specific goal was to create a new international economic order. That was their words, not mine. The NIEW, the New International Economic Order. And they set out to do this. They wrote policy papers every year, actually multiple policy papers every year, all of which, by the way, are available to the public for a price, but not a very large price, but is available. And when they set out in 1973 to do this, they had a strategy and they had a plan. And I'm going to share that with you so that you can see what they have done and how they have done it to us. Now, the question comes up, why did they need the Trilateral Commission? It didn't just come into existence by, well, we need something else to do, let's form a new group. There was a purpose behind it. And one of the early members of the Trilateral Commission was this gentleman, Richard Gardner. And Richard Gardner was an academic as well. And he wrote in a study paper called The Hard Road to World Order, he wrote, in short, the House of World Order, that's the NIEW at that time, would have to be built from the bottom up rather than from the top down. It will look like a great booming, buzzing confusion, to use William James' famous description of reality, but an end run around national sovereignty, eroding it piece by piece, will accomplish much more than the old-fashioned frontal assault. That's what he wrote. It's not what I wrote. You can check it out. It's documented in my paper where you can go find him saying that. Now, prior to 1973, there had been what they would consider several frontal assaults on the attack or on the movement towards the New World Order. And it had not happened. It had not gotten them anywhere. The Trilateral Commission specifically was put in place to become an end run around national security. Now, those of you who know football, you know what an end run is. It's where, when the enemy is not expecting it, you run in the opposite direction and run around the defenses and hopefully score a touchdown. Now, Zbigniew Brzezinski wrote a book in 1972, and remember, Brzezinski is a co-founder of the Trilateral Commission. He said in this book called Between Two Ages, he said, the nation state as a fundamental unit of man's organized life has ceased to be the principal creative force. International banks and multinational corporations are acting and planning in terms that are far in advance of the political concepts of the nation state. This is the man, the co-founder of the Trilateral Commission, obviously is on the border right down. He's just on the edge of a treasonous statement, isn't he? Okay. Then his prophecy then that he gave, I call this a prophecy. It's not a prophecy in a religious sense, but it's, not that he's not a religionist, but he said the technotronic era, that's what he called it, what we're mentioning now, involves a gradual appearance of a more controlled society. Does that happen? Amen, right? Such a society would be dominated by an elite, unrestrained by traditional values. And by the way, we're talking about traditional values this morning. That's all I've heard so far, okay? I'm for that too, by the way. But in his mind, his prophetic statement is that this elite will rule unrestrained by traditional values. This is the enemy that we're up against, folks. Now, let me explain to you how this happened, what their plan was. When James Earl Carter came onto the political scene, this is how he got there. He ran into Nelson Rockefeller in early 1973. He ran into Nelson Rockefeller at a conference, and impressed Nelson Rockefeller, that's the brother of David Rockefeller, impressed him to the point that Nelson took Carter to Brzezinski and his brother, David, and introduced them and said, this guy has promise, you should talk to him. He was subsequently picked by Zbigniew Brzezinski personally. Brzezinski has written about this, by the way. This is not a secret. It's not hearsay. He's written about this. He was picked, tutored, and schooled by Brzezinski in everything that had to do with foreign policy. And then he simultaneously made a member, almost a charter member of the Trilateral Commission. And then he had a campaign that was launched, that was financed and strategized by members of the Trilateral Commission, other people in the Trilateral Commission. And of course, his campaign slogan, you should remember this, you gray-haired guys and gals, I will never lie to you. Okay, that's a great way to start, right? Now, he was elected by a landslide in 1976, right? Well, this is interesting. So what did he do after he was elected? The result was he swept no less than 30% of the membership of the Trilateral Commission into top positions in his government. 30%. You say, were there no other qualified people in America that could have taken these top cabinet positions? Of course there were. But the agenda was to hijack and capture the executive branch of the United States government, the most powerful country on the planet. So, look at a partial list here. I couldn't list them all, I don't want to do it, but look at some of them here. These are all members of the Trilateral Commission, by the way. Walter Mondale was his vice president. He also was a member. Zbigniew Brzezinski, of course, became the National Security Advisor. Michael Blumenthal, Secretary of Treasury. Fred Bergsten, Undersecretary of the Treasury. Cyrus Vance was the Secretary of State. Harold Brown, the Secretary of Defense. James Schlesinger, the Secretary of Energy. Elliot Richardson, this is interesting, delegate to the Law of the Sea. Does anybody know what the Law of the Sea Treaty is? Do you realize it's coming up at the end of this month for a vote? And if it gets passed, if we accede to that treaty, we will be a part, don't get me started on that. It has nothing to do with it today, but this is the next big battle. Amnesty probably was the last. This is the next big battle that America needs to get on, is Law of the Sea Treaty. Well, here they were back in 1976, signing a member of the Trilateral Commission to the United Nations to be a delegate to the Law of the Sea. Leonard Woodcock, chief envoy to China. You remember Woodcock, by the way, was a labor leader, the head of a labor union. It's interesting that he was one of the early, in fact, really the first chief envoy that was created, the position was created for him, to China, where we have lost the vast majority of jobs in this country, manufacturing jobs. And this is the man, the labor leader, supposedly, that paved the way for that. And then, of course, Andrew Young, the ambassador to the United Nations. Just a few, okay? You say, wow, how would you like to have an organization where you could get the ear of people like this, and where you could handpick your own organization to be seated? Do you think you could have a lobby that would be second to none? Think of the power and the things that you could get done if you had people like this in these positions. Senator Barry Goldwater, just in case you think I'm nuts, some people suggested that, but I'm pretty hard to pin down, usually because I'm bigger than everybody else. But Senator Barry Goldwater, who is perhaps one of the last great statesmen that America has had, he wrote a book in 1979 called With No Apologies, and in that book, this statement appeared. It's documented in my paper. Again, you can go find the book in the library and look at the chapter and verse, okay? He said, the Trilateral Commission is international and is intended to be the vehicle for multinational consolidation of the commercial and banking interests by seizing control of the political government of the United States. The Trilateral Commission represents a skillful, coordinated effort to seize control and consolidate the four centers of power: political, monetary, intellectual, and, we're not going to talk about this today, ecclesiastical. That's a whole other story. Well, Goldwater was the kind of man, this is one of the reasons he didn't get elected to the presidency, He told it like it was. He was absolutely fearless in his proclaiming of the truth. And I may say, in a lot of ways, he had some characteristics of a candidate today that's running for president, Ron Paul, whose table is represented over here, or I should say he's represented on that table over there. Ron Paul is not afraid to speak his mind either. If it's on his mind and it's right, he just speaks it out, and if you don't like it, well, that's, that, in the big political arena, he may get a little further than Barry Goldwater did back then, but it's going to be iffy because people don't like to hear that. Now, you say, well, how do we know that the Trilateral Commission had any influence over the years on the government of the United States? I'm going to show you a couple of things here you probably have never seen before, but I just want you to observe that the world, you know what the World Bank is. It's one of the most powerful global banking organizations that gives, lends money to third world countries and other countries around the world for development. I'm not going to go into a big discussion on the World Bank, but it's a critical organization to globalization. And the World Bank presidents since 1968, here they are. There's not very many of them. There's only, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And there they are. And there's the years that they were actually presidents of the World Bank. They're appointed, by the way, by the President of the United States. That's the tradition. The International Monetary Fund receives its president from Europe. That's the tradition there. They choose the IMF president, and our president chooses the World Bank president. Well, here's the interesting thing. Out of these 7 people, 6 of them were members of the Trilateral Commission. Is that by accident? You see, this persists over a period of time from Robert McNamara starting in 1973, going through the present 2007. 6 out of 7, that doesn't mean, by the way, that Preston was a good guy. He was still a globalist as well. 6 out of 7 have been chosen from the ranks of the Trilateral Commission. Are there no other people in the world that could be president of the World Bank except members of the Trilateral Commission? See, well, obviously no, but there's an agenda here. There's an agenda. Let's look at the U.S. trade representatives that have been also appointed by the president over the years. On the right is the president who appointed these gentlemen. And on the left are their names, and in the middle, the dates and so on. They served as USTR. Now, the USTR has been responsible for all kinds of skullduggery in America. It's been responsible, for instance, for hundreds of treaties and trade pacts and agreements and stuff that have been passed over the years. And the USTR, for instance, was instrumental in creating NAFTA, the World Trade Organization, etc. Okay? Now, how many people? There's 10. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. How many of these do you think were members of the Trilateral Commission? That many. 8 out of 10 were members of this same organization. They have an agenda. Create a new international economic order. And by the way, George H.W. Bush, who is also a member of the same organization, said in 1991, he gave some speeches to the United Nations and some political speeches, campaign speeches, and he began to use and popularize the term New World Order versus the New International Economic Order. That it was kind of morphed into the New World Order after that time, about 1991. So here we see also that the presidents along the way that were involved in appointing these people are very consistently Jimmy Carter, Reagan, Bush, Clinton, George Bush, W. Bush, and so on. There seems to be a pattern that transcends political parties. You must see this if you want to understand the domination that this group has had over our executive branch. Now, here's some of the presidents and vice presidents. All of these are members of the Trilateral Commission. Read the list. Carter and Mondale were the first 2 that arrived on the scene. George H.W. Bush came right after that. George H.W., by the way, some of you remember, was solidly bounced out of the primaries when Reagan was first elected in 81. He was bounced out of the primaries, defeated, humiliated, disgraced, had a meltdown actually, and then at the convention, at the Republican convention that came along soon after, he was drafted in the back door as Reagan's vice president. So the influence continued. And so then you had William Jefferson Clinton, also a member of the Trilateral Commission and dedicated to the same globalist goals. Al Gore, his vice president, was also a member. And now in our current presidency, we have Richard Cheney, who is a member of the Trilateral Commission. In fact, it's interesting, the Cheney family, powerful that they are on both sides, his wife Lynn, in her own right, is also a member of the Trilateral Commission. Interesting, isn't it? Okay, I need to take you to another pattern now where we talk about treaties, agreements, and regulations. Now, the U.S. Constitution provides for the Senate to negotiate treaties with foreign countries. That's very directly stated in the Constitution. They have abdicated their responsibility by giving away authority to other entities to do the negotiation over the years. I'm not going to go into that totally, but the deal is with treaties is that treaties are to be negotiated by the Senate, and they're to require 2/3 vote of the people present in the Senate at the time that a vote is made in order to pass a treaty, in order to make a treaty with another country. That's the safeguard that the founders put into the Constitution. Now, when the subject of agreements comes up, agreements are different in that a trade agreement does not require the vote like a treaty does at 2/3. It only is usually negotiated by the administration or somebody there, like the USTR, and it requires only 1/2 vote, 50% vote of those present in the Senate at the time. 2/3 went to 1/2. Well, that's a serious degradation in the safeguard, if you will, to keep bad treaties out and keep good treaties corralled. So we've had, for instance, NAFTA, CAFTA, and the FTAA, and so on. These are being presented as agreements. NAFTA ends in an A, the North American Free Trade Agreement. It's not a treaty, it's an agreement. So, the third step in this process is regulations. We have progressed or digressed from treaties, agreements, to now there's a body of action in our government that now no longer do we really need the Senate at all. Now they feel like they can just basically create and change regulations at will. And so without any congressional oversight and so on. So we see the appearance of the Security and Prosperity Partnership, for instance, that was started in 2005 by George Bush, president, and the Premier of Canada and the President of Mexico. And so now the big incentive or the big initiative in Washington is simply to change regulations without any legal basis necessarily, but to change regulations to quote unquote harmonize them with Mexico and Canada. No checks and balances from anywhere. Now in order to get all this done, you've heard this term before, fast track. Well, by itself you hear fast. What does that mean? Well, TPA stands for Trade Promotion Authority, and we're going to see that what this means. The bottom line is that these agreements can be negotiated by the administration and presented to the Senate for an up or down vote within 30 days. There's only like 18 hours of public debate allowed, and the Senate must vote either yay or nay, and they have 30 days to do so by law. And you say, well, why has there been such a bitter struggle over fast track of this TPA authority over the years? Let me tell you where this comes from, about the fast track authority. This authority has raised havoc with our country because it's been a major a give up of authority of the Senate to allow the administration to do these things that the Senate was supposed to do. Boy, do we need to hold their feet to the fire. Number one, it was started originally with the Trade Act of 1974. You go back and research it. This is the first instance of the TPA in the government, within the administration. Now you remember, at the time, the president was Gerald Ford, who had taken over after Nixon resigned, right? Ford did not take an elected person as his vice president. He appointed Nelson Rockefeller. Do you remember that? Anybody remember that? He appointed Nelson Rockefeller to be the Vice President of the United States. He was not elected. He wanted to be elected. He never could be elected, but he finally got his position to be in the executive branch, and he was brought into the administration as Vice President. And those of you that constitutionalists know, what also is the Vice President of the country? He's the President of what? Senate. The Senate, right? So is it any surprise that the TPA gained traction in 1974 under the leadership of Nelson Rockefeller? Rockefeller, by the way, was not a member of the Trilateral Commission, but his brother was the founder. Okay, next, we have to look at what has TPA been used for over the years. There have been hundreds and hundreds of treaties and agreements negotiated and passed in the Senate, by the way, since early 1970s. But has TPA been used for every agreement that's come along? The answer is no. The TPA has been used very selectively only for Trilateral Commission goals that they have published freely in their own papers. And they have used it to fast-track their new international economic order. I'll give you an example. There's been only about 8 times so far that TPA has been invoked since only 8 times since 1974. One is the GATT-Tokyo round. That's a general agreement on tariffs and trade. Secondly was the U.S.-Israel Free Trade Agreement. Thirdly was the Canada-U.S. Free Trade Agreement. Then came NAFTA in 1993. Then came the GATT-Uruguay round, which created the World Trade Organization in the mid-90s. And then finally, just recently, came CAFTA. This is the extent of the Trade Promotion Authority in this country, the use of it. You see a pattern, don't you? These have been the things that are destroying us today. NAFTA, the World Trade Organization, CAFTA now, which hasn't been implemented, but it's been passed, and it's coming at us like an express train as well. These are the evidences of what the Trilateral Commission has done since the early 1970s to us. They have used their hegemony to create policies that bring these things about. You and I did not vote on these things. You and I did not approve of these things. Yet, here we are. They did it, and we're sitting here looking back at it wondering, what on earth happened to us? Now, I'll just say a word just quickly about the CFR, because this comes up all the time. Somebody asked me the question, well, isn't the CFR in charge of America? Don't they tell everybody what to do here? The answer is no. There's over 3,000 members of the CFR, covering all of North America now. And if that were the case, and the Trilateral Commission only had 3% of, they have 300 members, that would be about 10% of the membership of the CFR in general. You'd expect that the board of directors would reflect that, because it's an elected board, they say. You'd expect that it would reflect it. But however, we find that 44% of the board of the CFR are members of the Trilateral Commission. Okay? That tells you who's in charge of the Trilateral Commission at this point, or CFR. You read some of these names to surprise you. Carla Hills. How about Madeleine Albright? That's a surprise, right? And then you see other people. You see some academics over here. Richard Holbrook, we talked about him before. And then you have, the CFR has an international advisory board. You see another 8 members of the Trilateral Commission on the international advisory board as well. That's all I want to say about the CFR. Now let's talk about Carla Hills. Carla Hills, a member of the Trilateral Commission, was a USTR under George H.W. Bush. She was the principal and is the indisputable principal of the architect of NAFTA. And she was a signer of NAFTA, the initialer anyway, with Bush, and she was a member of the Trilateral Commission. Now let's just look at a picture here. We'll have a little picture time. Here's Carla Hills in the red, seated at the table, signing or initialing with George H.W. Bush standing right behind, initialing the NAFTA treaty. It wasn't passed into law until Bill Clinton took the handoff, and he got it passed and run through the Senate. And here we have Bill Clinton signing it a little bit later during his early administration. He's signing the bill, legislation actually, and you see the President of Canada standing behind him. And well, here's the picture of Clinton and Ernesto Zedillo. Zedillo, shaking hands and having a great old time. This is an interesting picture because looking backwards now, Zedillo was not a member of the Trilateral Commission at the time, but shortly thereafter he was, and so they're both members of the Trilateral Commission in good stead. And here they are hugging each other. Basically, Clinton's giving away our country, and who knows what Zedillo's thinking. But he's saying thank you, thank you. So here you have the elements of what I would call, in legal terms almost, you call collusion. These people are agreeing and meeting and doing things, basically without the permission, without the oversight of Congress, without funding from Congress, etc. And what a shame. Oh, here's I thought I'd throw this in. The Trilateral Commission at 25, this was, I think, 1998, and they had a big old reunion in Washington, or no, it was New York. And here's a few of them. You recognize any of these people? You might recognize that guy on the far right over there in that little corner right there. Anybody know who that is? That's David Rockefeller, right? How about this guy? That's old Zabiggy himself. Anybody know who this is? Come on. Paul Volcker. Paul Volcker was chairman of the Federal Reserve for many, many years before Greenspan, a member of the Trilateral Commission. And so the rest of them here, you have Peter Sutherland here from Europe, and you have Sadako Ogata from Japan, and there are a few women involved in the Trilateral Commission, as I mentioned, like Lynn Cheney as well. And so it was just a big old happy time, and they were giving each other awards and stuff and slapping each other on the back for a job well done, I'm sure. Now, do you know this man? Robert A. Pastor. If you don't know him, he's the most dangerous man in America today. He is the man who is being called the father of the North American Union. And he truly is, because he is the major academic pushing it in the same sense that Brzezinski pushed the new international economic order in the early 70s. Pastor is pushing the North American community currently. He was a protege, interestingly enough, you might surmise this, he was a protege of Zbigniew Brzezinski in the 1970s. Whoa, how'd this happen? Amazing. Now, some of you remember this. If you don't, here's the history lesson for your young people. Robert Pastor was the executive director of the infamous Linowitz Commission in 1976 that was chaired by Saul Linowitz, the director of Chemical Bank at the time. And this committee, or this commission, had 7 of the 8 members of this commission were members of the Trilateral Commission. 7 out of 8. And Robert Pastor was chosen, a young man at the time, was chosen to be executive director. The Linowitz Commission developed a policy to cede the Panama Canal to Panama, communist Marxist dictator. They ceded it. When I say that, I mean they gave it away. Sovereign U.S. property, they gave it away. And it was a huge loss to national security. Both ends of the Panama Canal now and everything in the middle are run by Chinese companies, communist Chinese companies. We've lost control of Panama Canal. Robert A. Pastor was the driving force. He actually wrote the policy that the rest of them dictated to him, but it was his hands on the typewriter. This is the man who was now chosen, or not chosen, but who has now been put forward as the father of the North American Union. Where do you think the policy for the NEU came from? Disneyland? No. It came from the inner workings of the Trilateral Commission. They put their own people in positions of power to accomplish this. Pastor recently said, in one of the books he wrote, Europeans facing the crisis of 2 world wars turned to the European community as a means to prevent war and advance their economic interests. Well, that's nice. What's interesting here is that he fails to mention that the European Constitution in 2002 was actually authored by Valéry Giscard d'Estaing, who is also a member of the Trilateral Commission. Small world, isn't it? The European community, by and large, got its traction because of the early work of members of the Trilateral Commission, the same way that they got into our country as well. They were the driving force to bring the EU into existence, to bring the monetary union into existence, and so on. Now, Pastor recently said, and this was not in a newspaper here, but it was in a Spanish newspaper down south of us. He said that a crisis is an event which can force democratic governments to make difficult decisions like those that will be required to create a North American community. It's not that I want another 9/11 crisis, but having a crisis would force decisions that otherwise might not get made. Oh, thank you. We needed to know that, didn't we? So the bottom line is there a crisis on the horizon? Is there a crisis on the horizon? A currency collapse? Well, that's going on right now. How about a stock market collapse? Yeah, that's going on. How about a housing collapse? How about a credit market collapse? That's happening too. How about U.S. insolvency? We're close to that. How about a U.S. terrorist attack? That could happen at any time. It's still, it's the question of when, not if anymore. Major crises on the way. How about global warming? Well, maybe you're not fooled, but Al Gore, bless his heart, member of the Trilateral Commission as well, we're all going to die, right? If we don't do something, we're all going to die, so you better trust us to give you a solution. Well, when a crisis hits, here's the bottom line. When it hits the fan, and you know it's going to, some of these crises, by the way, are exacerbated by these people. Don't watch the crisis, watch the enemy. Because sleight of hand is going to hit when the crisis hits. They will be doing their dirtiest work to bring us into the North American community. Watch the enemy, not the crisis. Now let's just skip a beat a little minute. My time's running out and I want to cover a few more things. Talk about current events here. John McCain recently got an interesting endorsement. It was just a little article somewhere in the newspaper. I spotted it and it meant something to me but nobody else. John McCain got an endorsement from 4 people at the same time on a letterhead, from Henry Kissinger, George Shultz, Alexander Haig, and Lawrence Eagleburger. Anybody know what the commonality there is?
Secretary of State.
Well, they're all secretaries of state, right? That's cool. Wow, you think, man, if all the secretaries of state would endorse McCain, that's a really good deal. Well, here's the interesting thing. They're all members, former members of the Secretary of State. They're all members of the Trilateral Commission as well. Every one of them. Every last one of them. They're standing behind, in this group in particular, is standing behind John McCain. Now, for those of you, you may not think anything about Eagleburger or George Shultz, but I don't know if I'd want to do anything and have Henry Kissinger's endorsement. I think that would be a liability more than an asset, but nevertheless, there he is. Now, how about Obama? So on the Democratic side, here's what Zbigniew Brzezinski recently wrote. I haven't heard him endorse anybody for 25 years, but he wrote just recently, I think there's a need for a fundamental rethinking of how we conduct world affairs, and Obama seems to me to have both the guts and the intelligence to address that issue and to change the nature of Americans' relationship to the world. Are you a little nervous about that now? That Obama would pick up an endorsement from Brzezinski that would say something like this? Somebody has further suggested, by the way, that Brzezinski is tutoring Obama right now in foreign policy. Oh, we don't need friends like that, folks. So how about the election 2008? I'm no prophet, and I'm not really a political analyst. But I'll tell you what's interesting. You've got Hillary, possibly, probably, who's a member of Bill Clinton, is a member of the commission. You've got Hillary and probably Obama. It's a good choice maybe to come on a ticket with her. Who knows who would be first, but they'll be on the ticket together, likely at this point. And then on the Republican side, you've got Thompson and McCain. Well, Thompson seems to be in front of everything right now. McCain seems to have lost his whole organization, but he does have all the secretaries of state behind him. Interesting. Well, you know what? Thompson is a member of the Trilateral Commission as well. Oh, boys, forget him, okay? So are we going to have a choice in 2008? No, we're not. Right now, there's going to be no choice in 2008. That's why we need to attach ourselves. If we want the issues to be raised, we need to attach ourselves to the Ron Pauls of the world and to the other people, the other alternate candidates who are running, the Tom Tancredis and so on, to get behind them so the issues get raised to the American people so they can understand what's going on. Otherwise there will be no choice at all. Interesting. Well, you know what? If you haven't figured this out yet, we're in a heap of doo-doo. You know what I mean? We're in deep trouble. Because America never counted on enemies like this from within. I don't remember growing up nobody told me. that they were enemies of the state and that probably our defeat would come from within. I always thought defeat would come from without. Yet these people, supposedly good, loyal Americans, if you listen to them, these people are actively taking us down as a nation. When the president stands up to take his oath of office to defend the Constitution of the United States and other things that he's supposed to do, I don't know what he's thinking when he says it. But when you look at his actions, this current president has done more to further the globalist agenda than all of the presidents before, including Jimmy Carter. He has brought us closer to the brink of destruction as a country by refusing to close the border with Mexico, by refusing to shut down the very unfair free trade that we have today that's engulfing us, to shut down the Chinese garbage that's coming into our country and completely making a shambles out of our own regulatory agencies that have been set up over decades to make sure we don't die from what we're putting in our mouth. Okay? So we're in deep trouble, bottom line. I can't stress it enough, but you know what? There could be help on the horizon. I don't know. It's bleak. I said to one guy here recently, I said, remember the Alamo. We may go down like the Alamo. Those of us who are going to be inside, go rent the movie if you haven't seen it recently. We may end up like that in the end, but you know what? I figure if I'm going to go in the end, and you're all going to get there one day too, I'm not going to go rolled over to this global elite. I will not. Yeah. But here's the deal. Some of you old-timers are going to remember this song. Give me some men who are stout-hearted men who will fight for the right they adore. Start me with 10 who are stout-hearted men, and I'll soon give you 10,000 more. This is what we need in America. You young people, especially you young guys, you're going to be some of these stout-hearted men. If there was ever a need in history for stout-hearted men, it is today. If there was ever a time for stout-hearted men to stand up, it is today. And God bless the women in this group in Eagle Forum that have stood to the fore to bring some of this message out. But let me tell you something. The women of our country will not win this fight. Guys, stout-hearted men are needed too. The women may stand behind us, but it's the men who need to stand up and be willing to fight for our country. There was a guy that ran in Texas recently in the last election. He was a Texas Democrat, liberal, progressive Democrat. I love Texas Democrats, by the way. They're stout-hearted men. This guy ran on a platform of being anti-big oil, and he put a sign right across from Exxon's headquarters in Richardson or wherever it is in Texas, and basically said, "We're coming for you." That was his thing. But the tagline on his bulletin board says, and you got to love the spirit, "We will fight you till hell freezes over, and then we'll fight you on ice." I like that, because that's the kind of determination that we had better adopt and let them know it. You see, don't just keep it to ourselves. We need to let them know it too. You will not be allowed to get away with what you're doing. Now, they may succeed in their plans, but they will not get away with it without somebody pointing a finger in their nose and saying, "Sir, you are wrong." And you know you're wrong. We have the high moral ground here, folks. They don't. They're crooks. They're charlatans. They're evil to the core. We have the high moral ground, and we must not give an inch. We must reverse the tide by knowing our enemy, by knowing ourselves, and then having the courage to stand up and make a difference. This is the message that needs to come out in this election, this cycle. Wow. May God help America. May God help America. If God doesn't help us, we're done. But even if he does, it still may be a struggle, and it may be time for America to be off the face of the map. Who knows? But there are people, if they have their way, will merge the United States, Mexico, and Canada into a North American Union that will look much like the European Union does today. They will do this by the year 2010. That's their date that they're shooting for. 2010. That's 3 years away. Will it be Obama? Will it be Hillary? Will it be Thompson? Will it be McCain? Doesn't matter, does it? Their agenda and their timetable is 2010. We have 3 years left, perhaps, to do something about it before our Constitution is irrevocably lost. That's serious stuff. And I don't mean to depress you, but you have to face the truth if you're going to make a difference in turning the tide in our country. Thank you for your time. God bless you.